This is a Ferrari F40, and this is a Porsche Carrera GT, and these are the two finest modern cars manufactured by Ferrari and Porsche. They are also generally agreed to be some of the greatest analog supercars of all time. No driver aids, manual transmissions, require a little bit of skill to drive. They are also two of my very favorite cars. In fact, probably my two very favorite cars. And so today, I've decided to do a little back-to-back comparison test between the two. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. We've had some amazing sales recently on Cars and Bids, including this Ferrari 575M, which sold for just under $131,000, a great number for a great car with the HGTC package. We also recently sold this E92 M3 for $71,000 with only 3,000 miles, and this beautiful E30 M3 sold for just under $60,000. Gorgeous and special car. If you're looking to sell your cool car from the 1980s or up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. You'll get the most money and the most interest in your car. And if you're looking to buy a cool car from the modern era, we have daily auctions with great selection at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed these two special cars from the Triple F collection, which is an exotic car collection here in Ohio that has some truly amazing vehicles. Koenigsegg, Pagani, F40, Carrera GT, New Ford GT, they have it all. And you can follow them on Instagram, the Triple F collection. And it's actually one of my very favorite follows because they actually use their amazing cars, unlike some accounts which put them in a little garage under covers and never really take them out. They drive them. So click the link in the description below to follow the Triple F collection on Instagram. Now, I've already reviewed both of these cars in huge detail on my YouTube channel, the quirks and features of the F40 and the Carrera GT, so I am not going to do that today. I will link those reviews in the description below if you want to check out a very thorough tour of the quirks and features of both cars. Instead, today I am going to do something that very few people have the opportunity to do, something I will probably never have the chance to do again. I'm going to drive both of these cars back to back. The single greatest driver-focused car from Porsche and from Ferrari back to back. It's an unbelievable opportunity. Let's do it. Now, before I drive, I do want to do a quick refresher on both of these cars. This is obviously the Porsche Carrera GT, and historically, it has been my all-time favorite car. In my opinion, the greatest car ever built, and I have not been shy about calling this kind of the high watermark for combustion engine cars, the high point before stuff started to turn into hybrids. And the latest crop of hybrid supercars is great. The 918 Spider, the P1, they're all cool, but they're not this. Amazing driving experience, incredible engine note, and just in case you don't know, 6-speed manual transmission, naturally aspirated V10, about 605 horsepower, and these days, nice Carrera GT models are selling between $700,000 and about $1 million, or maybe a little bit more. But then there's the F40. I always really liked the F40, and then I drove one about 4 years ago, and ever since then I've started to think, maybe I actually like this more. This is also an unbelievable driver's car. Very famously, Enzo Ferrari's last car that he green-lighted back when he was still alive and built to commemorate Ferrari's 40th anniversary. This has about 470 horsepower from a turbo V8, also a manual transmission, also no driver aids, and also probably the greatest car ever made. For these, figure $1 million at the minimum to about $1.5 million, and maybe even a little more. These are going up in value. So are those, actually. Driving the Carrera GT. The second greatest sounding car I have ever heard in my entire life, second only to the Lexus LFA, which also used a naturally aspirated V10. Now, this car and me have a little bit of a history. I love the Carrera GT. I'm not a huge Porsche guy, but I really think that this car specifically is the greatest car ever made. And I've thought that for a long time. You know, I famously buy little Carrera GT models at grocery stores whenever I go in there selling them. And the wedding rings at my wedding were like tied to little Carrera GTs when the ring bearers took them down the aisle. The car is just so special, in part because it really kind of changed my life. I started car spotting when I saw a Carrera GT on the road back in 2005 when it was new, and that sort of led to various other things which led me here. And so I've always felt not only is this car special to me, but it's just such an amazing car, and it's cool to have that specialness to me also be such a special car. Now, the first thing I want to cover, I drove the Carrera GT first in part because the F40 is obviously a lot older, and I feel like if I drive the F40 first, I'm going to be so focused when I drive the Carrera GT on just how much newer it feels. I don't want to be thinking that. I want to be focused just on driving experience. A greater sounding engine does not exist. Yeah, I don't even need to drive the F40. This is the greatest car ever made. All right, a couple things I noticed right away. The clutch and shifter. The clutch gets discussed a lot because a lot of people talk about how it's hard to drive. You have to basically let the entire way off the clutch before you can begin to accelerate. I don't find this to be that weird. I don't find it to be that difficult. Once 2 seconds, you realize, okay, that's what I have to do, and then you do it. And the other key is when you're moving, you just drive it like normal. So 90% of the time when you're driving the car, you're just cruising around driving it like a normal clutch. It's no big deal. And it is the sweetest clutch and shifter of any car ever at any point in all time. The clutch is unbelievable. It's not light, but it isn't heavy. It's perfect, I would say. The engagement point, very clear, very easy to figure out. The shifter is very easy. Just so nice to toss it around, go into gear, whatever. Rev match downshifts. It feels very notchy. You stick it in gear and there's no vagueness, but it's also light to pull out of the notch and throw into the next gear. And so it's easy to just toss around the gears in this car, which is crazy to think about when we're talking about a Carrera GT, but that is the truth. Love the quick revving too. The small clutch, no flywheel situation makes it so that you can rev instantly. So when you're going to rev up for a downshift to rev match, you can place the revs precisely where you want instantaneously. And I know dual clutches are faster, but this is better. It's just better. Now this car obviously has a bit of a reputation. In fact, my three kind of favorite exotic sports cars all do. I obviously own the Ford GT, the only one of these I can afford, which is well known for being a handful. This car, obviously well known for being a handful. It's been involved in multiple highly publicized fatal accidents, and it's a dangerous car. And the F40 is also not something you want to screw around with. The thing about it is, though, to me at least, this car is actually pretty sweet to drive, easy to drive carefully and safely. The reason I think it's such trouble for people is because it can change so quickly. The car is so easy to drive that it lulls you into a bit of a false sense of security. Oh, no problem, you know, it's easy. The shifter's easy, the gear lever's easy. This is just like driving a Boxster or a 911. Well, it's not really. It requires a lot more finesse and a lot more care, and you have to give it that care. But because it lulls you into thinking that it's easy to forget, and you're going really fast, you're going in a corner thinking, I got this, and that's when it bites you. I love everything about this car. Literally everything about this car I love. The driving experience is amazing. The sound is incredible. The acceleration is fantastic. The clutch and shifter action are absolutely unbelievable. The way that it steers is so predictable and wonderful, like I said, until it bites you, but that's the truth. It's easy to fit in. It's easy to see out of. It has a lot of shared stuff with other Porsches, so everything makes sense and is convenient and is rational, unlike so many other crazy supercars. You know, that's one of the reasons I like my Ford GT. It's just rational. You don't have to put up with all sorts of stupid decisions. It was made by a company who knows what they're doing. Ford, they make a lot of cars. Same deal with this. Porsche, made by a company that has a rational idea of how a car should be made. So when they build a supercar, it's rational. This car. I have driven in my life 3 Carrera GTs. This is the first time I've ever driven it with no passenger, so I can kind of do what I want. And the Triple F collection, I should note, has been very generous, saying, yeah, go take F40 Carrera GT, great idea, go do it. They're like, they're super into sharing the cars, and I really appreciate that. It's amazing to be able to just take this out, and I start to get in my mind like, this could be me, except these cars continue to get more and more valuable. Woo! Listen to that! That guy in that Kia Sorento I just passed is the luckiest person alive. He just got to hear a full throttle. Okay, maybe this guy just passed in a Ford Explorer. That's a special thing, to be able to hear a Carrera GT at full revs. I bet they're like, oh, that guy's driving so fast, I'm gonna call the police. They don't know. They don't appreciate the beauty of this moment. This car combines all the great things about Porsche, which is great build quality, great engineering, subtle styling, usability. Those are Porsche's 4 biggest selling points. And then you combine it with, here's a true emotional supercar. No stability control, naturally aspirated V10 that sounds great, amazing driving experience. It's like the best the Italians could do combined with the best that Porsche could do. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. And of course, the car benefited also from time period. It just so happens that, you know, the automatic supercars started coming next. The hybrid supercars started coming next. And again, they're great cars, but they're not, the driving experience isn't the same. And I think almost all car enthusiasts agree about that. Greatest car ever made? Yeah. Yeah, it is. I love a lot of cars. Very, very fortunate to own several cars that I love, to have driven cars that a lot of people love. But this is a marvel. It's a total marvel. I truly cannot imagine that I will drive the F40 next and think, hey, this is better. You know, I drove the Carrera GT once in 16 and once last year. And I drove the F40 in 17. They've been very spaced. And over that time, the F40's legend has grown in my mind. But having now driven this again, I truly believe there's no way that I walk away from this thinking that the F40 is the better car. This is just the best package that has ever existed in the entire history of the exotic sports car and the sports car in general. This is it. This is the best sports car ever, and thus, by definition, the best car ever. So, now I'm gonna go drive the F40, but before I do that, I'm gonna leave you with a little acceleration from Carrera GT. All right, driving the F40. This is also an absolute legend, a total icon. You know, I've been reading recently some reviews of this car from people who are looking at it now and saying, you know, it actually feels kind of agrarian. It feels kind of so rough, and it's not that great of a driver's car because it's just so rough to drive and tractor-like, and it's not really all that driver's car-like in that sense. And I will say, driving it, you know, one of the first things you notice, it certainly is not as well put together as the Carrera GT. There's no doubt about that. But I've actually always felt that the F40, granted I only have driven one, but I spent about 2 hours driving it, and I'll do about the same today. And I've always kind of felt that the F40 is a little bit of a hidden gem among Ferraris. And I say that because, you know, you think, hidden gem, this is like one of the great supercars, but the truth is nobody drives these. And so you don't really know how good it is to drive because none of the owners of these cars actually use them. And when I drove the F40 for my video a few years ago, I was blown away by how fun it is. And I've been thinking about that ever since. Like, you know, this is actually kind of a little go-karty type, throw it around, have fun on a weekend back road kind of car. You just never hear about that because all you hear about is how special it is. Enzo's last car, the values are over $1 million. There's only 1,300 of them, there's 200 in the United States, and all these special things. The driving experience is kind of lost. And I think people who call it agrarian or too rough, I think they're not placing it in enough context. And frankly, I think they're not driving it hard enough. I think that those people They get in, it's difficult to get in, they turn the key, they hear everything fire up, it's sound, you know, you hear all the sounds, it's rough, it's tight in here, there's not a lot of creature comforts, and so that's what they think. But when you actually get the car on the road, that's what it's for. So today we do that. Once again, the very first thing I'm struck by driving this car is how eager it feels. It's fast. The front end slopes, very famously, slopes right down basically to the ground. And so you really feel basically like you're at the front of the car, essentially. And so there's this feeling that you're driving a go-kart when you're driving this thing around. Like you're really right up there at the road at the front of the car. And that's kind of a cool feeling. The car is actually easier to drive than I think you would think just based on your knowledge of what an old Ferrari is like and what the F40 is like. The clutch is heavy, but not oppressive. It's certainly not as nice as the Carrera GT's clutch, but there's years in between. It's actually a pretty easy car. Steering is not that heavy. The problem that I have is fitting in it. I think that my height is the absolute maximum for this car. My knees are already pretty close to the wheel, which puts yourself in a little bit of a dangerous situation if you have to make, you know, big wheel movements quickly. You really can't be any taller and sit in this car than I am. But it's really not that difficult to drive. Gear changes are pretty easy. Rev matching is pretty easy. It's very quick to rev, very easy to rev. And again, the clutch is not really all that difficult to push in. Now, I will say the pedal box is pretty narrow. So I'm wearing like tennis shoes, not really ideal. You do kind of want driving shoes, which I think are so stupid, but cars like this, it's probably helpful. It's certainly helpful. It's difficult to drive the car and not be intimidated by it, and I really do think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of modern journalists don't really talk about how great it drives. They just are afraid to really drive it. But I find myself in a fortunate position to be here with the Triple F collection who wants the cars driven, exercised, used, enjoyed. And so I'm not really all that intimidated to drive it and see what's up. Now, although this is a gated shifter, so you have a gate in the middle to shift into, it's not as, I had a Ferrari 360 with a gated shifter. That car was a lot easier to put into the gates and felt a lot like sexier to shift. This, if any part of this car feels kind of agrarian, kind of rough and truck-like, it would be the shifter. You're kind of forcing it into each gate, and it doesn't have that sort of clink, clink, like you feel like you're so cool. That's kind of missing from the shifting experience in this car. It really does blow me away with this car how much you feel go-kart-like. It is an overused, you know, phrase in the car world, though that drives like a go-kart. But I don't know, this does. And it's crazy because it's an F40. You don't think of it like that, but it does. Accelerating in this car is a joy. It's fast. It's very, very, very fast. I suspect it's not as fast as Carrera GT, but the reason I like these cars has really nothing to do with their speed, and it's more to do with how fun they are. And they're both amazingly fun. It is such a go-kart. It is such a go-kart. It's amazing to me that how much it feels like one. It is just absolutely wild to drive this car and feel so close to the road and so nimble in the steering. You know, I talk about steering precision in so many modern cars, such a great benefit, and a lot of cars, modern cars, do have really tremendous steering precision. But this car is just, because it has manual steering, it's just so connected, and the instantaneous change in direction. And I recently drove the Ferrari SF90, which also felt like that, but the difference here is you're the one doing the work. And so that instantaneous change is somehow almost more rewarding. You turn the wheel, you're almost more connected to it. But I'll tell you, I've driven a lot of supercars from this era, late 80s, early 90s. You almost never find steering that's this good. You really don't. So many times it's either over-assisted with a lot of cars, XJ220 is like that, or it's just difficult. And it's not great, but it's manual steering. This car, very connected and really does have the go-kart feel. You can plant it, port it, throw it wherever you want it to go, and it'll listen and just kind of go. Now, I will say another thing, another big reason why I think a lot of people maybe are not the biggest supporters of this car from a driving perspective is it isn't for everybody. You know, Carrera GT is so much more usable. It's just so much more normal and drivable and whatever. The F40 isn't. It's tight in here. There's no comforts, like I said. The door latch to get out is a cord. Like, nothing in this car is nice. And I think a lot of people who drive these, you know, they think Ferrari. They've been in modern Ferraris. They think, oh, this will be cool like that. This is a purist's car. If you want a pure driving experience, this is what you want. And I do want a pure driving experience, thank you very much. It's just so connected. It's so fun to throw it around. I can't believe how much fun it is to toss around an F40 and push on it and make it go. This car is an absolute blast as long as you're not expecting the kind of luxury you get from a modern Ferrari or frankly even from the Carrera GT. There you go. That's my thoughts on the F40. It's so special to be able to drive around in this car. They only made, I think, 1270 F40s, maybe that's Carrera GT. They're about the same production number-wise, about 1,300 of each. And only 212 F40s for the United States market, including this car. It's amazing to drive. It really is. It's not any sort of comfortable luxury experience. But that's why it's so great. Let's go. So that's the drive. Ferrari F40, Carrera GT, back to back. I spent about an hour and a half in each of those cars, so 3 hours total driving them. Truly amazing experience that I probably will never have again. And at the end of that drive, I intentionally didn't film a conclusion because I wanted some time to really gather my thoughts and really think about how they felt, what it was like before I kind of gave my opinion on which one is better, which one is I would rather have, that sort of thing. It's a tough thing to decide, so I really wanted some time. And in fact, after I filmed that video, I drove from Columbus, Ohio to Washington, D.C., like 6.5 hours, and I thought the whole time, F40, Carrera GT, F40, Carrera GT, which is better? So now I'm gonna share my conclusions. The Carrera GT drives better, period. It simply drives better. And it's not just because it's newer. I think if the Carrera GT had been built at the same time as the F40, it would still drive better. And the 959 was kind of like that. It just perfect clutch, perfect shifter, perfect sound, perfect handling. It's amazing. The drive, it's a marvel of engineering. But the F40 still drives very well. Not as well, but it's still a total thrill. It's an unbelievable car. You put your foot down, you hear it, the turbos, it's raw, it's savage, it's really impressive. And the F40 is more of an icon. It just is. The Carrera GT is very well recognized, especially in the car world, but the F40 is an icon to a level where it is one of the most iconic cars in the history of the car, truly. So, the big two questions. Which one would I get? And which one is better? I'm actually gonna start with which is better. Objectively, that's tough. Which of these two cars is better? I think I'm gonna give sort of a non-answer. It depends on your perspective. The Carrera GT is better if you are focused more on driving. And if you want the best driving exotic car in history, that might be it. The F40 is better if you're focused more on having like a true icon car. If you want like the most special, amazing, whatever, the Carrera GT can't quite do that. And so if you happen to be considering between the two of them, that's the distinction. Do you want the icon, the Enzo's last car, one of the most amazing Ferraris ever built, or do you want the greatest driving experience of all time, a marvel of engineering, an amazing sound? It just depends on your perspective. But what about me? Which one would I get? Let's pretend they cost the same money. Which one would I choose? I've driven a lot of special cars, but this is a big one. F40 versus Carrera GT. I've thought about this a lot over the last few weeks. A lot. And the answer is the F40. It is a crazy statement, but you can get an amazing driving experience. Not quite on the level of the Carrera GT, but a truly amazing, raw, thrilling driving experience. And this iconic car, so much more of an icon than the Carrera GT, even as special as that car is. But that's if they cost the same money. And they don't. The simple truth is you can still get a Carrera GT for $700,000, $800,000, whereas nice F40s are now double that. And in that case, given the current market pricing, I gotta go with the Carrera GT. Yeah, it's not quite as much of an icon, but it drives way better, and it's still one of the greatest cars ever made for basically half price to one of the other greatest cars ever made. And I think that the Carrera GT is probably worth it in today's market conditions. But I also see Carrera GT pricing increasing, so maybe I'll have to change my opinion in a couple of years. So there you go, that's that. After a thorough back-to-back drive and a lot of thought, I would rather have the F40 if they cost the same. I'd rather have the Carrera GT in today's market. And in terms of which one is objectively better, I just think it depends on your perspective, whether you want the icon or the driver. But there you go, F40 versus Carrera GT, probably the greatest experience of my YouTube channel so far.